There are many entrepreneurs who fail, and there are some that succeed. And it's those who succeed and also fail along the way that transform an industry. And I think if Mark Twain were to look at the automotive industry, he would say that there are a lot of innovators that are doing a great job at disrupting our industry. But today we're going to talk about this disruption, but we're going to talk about how to thrive in this era of disruption. We're going to talk about how to spot disruption, how to plan for it, and how to keep score in this ever-changing digital world where the goalposts keep moving in terms of what success looks like. We have three fabulous thought leaders here today to talk to us for the next 2.5 hours. The first up is Trevor Byrne. Trevor started his career with Subaru and also worked with Volkswagen. Then he moved over to the agency side, and he is group director at Red Urban. He has exclusively been working in the automotive industry, and you can catch him on his very own podcast called The Bucket Seat. Ladies and gentlemen, to get things started, can we please give a warm round of applause for Trevor Byrne?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Christopher, thank you very much for that. So as you can see, I'm the host of a podcast called The Bucket Seat and also group account director at an advertising agency here in the city called Red Urban. So starting off, my name's Trevor Byrne. I'm a wildly passionate enthusiast of automotive. I'm an advertising guy, and I'm a podcast host. Before I get into it, I just want to quickly thank Trader for having me here at Carology. I'm really honored to be invited here to an event like this to be able to speak. And to be honest, having such great company like Brian Pash from PCG Companies, Tim Scott from Deloitte, and of course Christopher Mercer from Trader, these guys all have a tremendous amount of knowledge that I think you'll find really useful throughout the entire day. So for me, I'm going to start on some of the bigger trends. We were talking about it earlier, and awareness is really something that's top of mind for me and what I do every day. Understanding and being aware of what's happening in the industry, both automotive and not, especially from a disruption standpoint, is a very important part of what I've been looking at and what I do. So I've seen the rise and fall and rise again of social platforms and how brands have played a big part of this, roller coasters up and down, the change in traditional media that's adapted, and as a result, some of those brands have excelled, some of them have failed, and some of them have just completely abstained. The good news is, in this ecosystem, it's always changing, and there's new ways to market products. There's new ways to distribute them, there's new ways to share ownership in them and talk about them, and it's constantly changing. So that's a source of an endless amount of fascination for me and in my career. But on the other side of it, and watching and building experiences for consumers, I've also had a brand of my own. As Christopher mentioned, it's called The Bucket Seat, and it's a podcast that I host. I managed to keep it alive between 2 kids under 4 and a job that I love very much. And it's really composed of an Instagram account of all the beautiful things I see in the automotive industry and an actual podcast that I host myself when I have guests on of varying interests in the industry that all have a passion for something automotive. So I've had the pleasure of speaking with automotive film directors like Tamira Moskovich, the director of Urban Outlaw, a documentary on the Porsche builder Magnus Walker, some great automotive journalists and brand builders like Lawrence Yap from the FAF Group and Jody Lai from autoguide.com, and even race car drivers and builders and collectors like Pat Sear from Serious Garage Works. Can't forget the Singer 911 owner, if any of you are familiar with these beautiful machines. There's, I believe, 2 of them here in Toronto. And I was able to interview Faisal Huda, the owner of that car. So in a long-winded way around it, I'm crazy about cars, but I'm also about the changes. I'm crazy about the changes that are happening in our industry, in and out of it. So from a communications perspective, they play a big role in many of our businesses in day-to-day. And I'm going to start with something that caught my eye that was a big disruption. It isn't necessarily new, and you may have seen it, but it's something that stopped me in my tracks, it moved me, and it made me think about the disruptors. I know this term's wildly overused and has been turned into a bit of a commodity, but Bruce was the one who was willing to rearrange a process and try something different. So you may recognize this short film. It's about 3.5 minutes long. its hero and his accomplishments, but I hope you enjoy because it was very inspirational for me from a disruption standpoint.
Let's start at the beginning. I'm a racing driver. I always was, always will be. Ever since my dad restored an aging Austin 7 Ulster and I entered my first hill climb competition, I never stopped. At age 22, I won my first Grand Prix and became the youngest ever winner up to that time. I would push the car to its limits over and over and over, on the track, in the paddock, in the mechanic's shop. I'd modify it, improve it, and master it till I dropped on the floor with exhaustion. In 1963, I founded my own motor racing team. Now, let me tell you just one story so you get what it was about. One day, as I was testing a car, I noticed that the fuel filler access door was flapping up and down. The thinking at the time was that it should have been pressed more firmly in place as the speed of the car increased. But instead it bounced more vigorously. At first I was angry that the door hadn't been properly closed. I've always hated sloppy work. But an idea was soon born out of my frustration. Stopping in the pits, I jumped from the car, ran to a mechanic's toolbox, grabbed a pair of shears, and started cutting the bodywork away behind the radiator. You should have seen the faces of the mechanics. Immediately, I began turning lap times faster than before. From that incident came the nostrils, a key design feature that is still used today. On the 2nd of June, 1970, my Can-Am car crashed on the Levant Straight just before Woodcote Corner at Goodwood Circuit in England. I was testing my new M8D when the rear bodywork came adrift at speed. I died, age 32. But what might be seen as a tragic end was in fact a beginning. As I always said, to do something well is so worthwhile that to die trying to do it better cannot be foolhardy. Indeed, life is not measured in years alone, but in achievement. That'd make a good epitaph, wouldn't it? So, on that beautiful summer day, on that racetrack, I did more than leave a name and a memory. Hopefully, I became an inspiration.
All right, so very serious, but every time I watch it, it gives me goosebumps, and it's always such an interesting, interesting piece of film. It's beautifully done, but at the same time, kind of gives us a look into the thought process behind some of those disruptors out there, be them with us or not. And on that note, I'd like to take a look at some of the cases of disruption that have set the tone for brand behavior outside of the racing and an even automotive world. I think it's important to see these examples as an inspiration for everything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis and in an extremely exciting industry like automotive as well. So we've seen disruption manifest itself in many different ways and in many different industries. So in cutting shopping for meal ingredients and recipes to cook from HelloFresh and Blue Apron, this one's a tough one, but it's they're one of the leaders in replacing humans in commercial and military operations around the world, Boston Dynamics. And attempting to cut out the automotive franchisee, Tesla. And again, attempting to cut out room for human error in driving, Waymo. And trying to cut out the traditional delivery process, companies like Carvana. Cutting out the traditional delivery process, companies like Lyft and Uber. And in map making and traffic services, companies like Waze. In ride sharing, we have GM's Maven, cutting out owning, but you still do have to deal with parking. Subscribed ownership, we have Fair.com and cutting out and helping to organize ownership. In used vehicle sourcing, we have companies like Shift.com and cutting out the uncertainty of used cars and shopping for them. The Airbnb model of the shared economy for cars, Turo, cutting out some boring cars and unproductive ownership time. And one of my favorites that I can't wait for it to exist here in Toronto, I'm hoping so, the on-demand delivery model for fuel, Yoshi. So what is it that all these companies have in common? So aside from cutting and reducing, it's their disruptive nature. Each of these companies have taken risks in challenging the way that the industry works, but have a ton of stake in the game. And if even only on the surface for now, they've claimed a certain level of success. I think that the important thing here is not necessarily the monetary position that these companies hold, because we all know that some of the names we saw aren't necessarily shining stars yet. But I do think that you can't argue against the merits of their disruptive nature, and a disruptive nature that's signaling a change. And it's that exact phrase, signaling a change, that I think is the most important part of what these companies are doing for the world and the automotive industry as a whole. So before we get into some of the next examples, I have about 4 videos to share of really, really interesting, very cool, some comedic examples of disruptors in different spaces. A few automotive examples and a few outside of the automotive space. But watch for this one. Google really saw an interesting problem in Colombia, and it really revolved around the idea of smartphone adoption and those in Colombia having or not having smartphones. So what they did have were kind of the traditional not-so-smartphones. This is Google's solution to that problem and giving them access to their services.
We use it for everything in our lives. Search for information, places, entertainment, literally everything. Unfortunately, many regions in Colombia are so remote that a lot of people still have no access to internet or smartphones. That's why many of them are still using legacy phones. How could we get those people closer to all the information they're missing? Introducing MyLine, powered by Google. A traditional telephone landline everyone can access, no matter the moment or the device.
MyLine brings the power of Google Assistant to anyone with access to a standard phone line. This inclusive technology makes search and artificial intelligence available to people without a smartphone or a computer. Using MyLine is incredibly simple. After placing a call to a regular local telephone number, the caller can ask Google Assistant a question. In just a second or two, we process the question in our custom software and connect with Google systems in the cloud. MyLine receives the response and speaks it back to the caller by phone.
¿Qué clima va a ser hoy?
Hoy va a haber 28 grados con tormenta eléctrica en Nuquí.
¿Quién descubrió América?
La reina Isabel de España permitió a Cristóbal Colón emprender un viaje en 3 carabelas, la Niña, la Pinta y la Santa María.
¿Cuándo es el partido de Colombia?
Colombia juega contra Japón el 19 de junio a las 7 de la mañana.
¿Qué ingredientes tiene el ajiaco?
3 clases de papa, pechuga de pollo o pierna pernil, mazorca, cebolla larga, guascas, aguacate y sal.
The line was promoted to encourage people to use it.
Con mi línea, Powered by Google, no va a existir ningún lugar en Colombia que no tenga acceso a la información, incluso donde no haya internet.
Now people can access information on the internet without having internet. Call in Colombia 6000-913. MyLine, powered by Google.
So a really interesting solution to a long-standing problem with these legacy phones, and basically turning every legacy phone now into a Google-powered assistant. So really cool solution to that problem from a disruptive standpoint. Next up is an example from the education space.
Right from a young age, Indian children face tremendous exam pressure. But it's not all grades their parents pay attention to.
नहीं, हम लोग को इंग्लिश, मैथ्स और ईवीएस ही देखना है. आर्ट, वर्क, एक्सपीरियंस, इसमें ज़्यादा कोई पेरेंट्स ध्यान नहीं देते. There are students who are really good with music, who are really good with arts, but they are not able to pursue it because
One because is not in English, and you won't be able to see those subtitles, so apologies for that. I've got lots more to share, though. This is a bit of a comedic example from Renault, which doesn't require those subtitles.
35 miles an hour.
Renault's adventure in Formula One started in 1977. That's 40 years today. It started with its car that was named Renault RS01.
So our competitors like to call the RS01 the yellow teapot because it used to break down quite a lot, and so it used to steam or smoke, and also they used to whistle.
So there is no better source of motivation than when people make fun of you, but you know that you are going in the right direction. And that point was made 2 years after, in 1979. The successor of that car, the RS10, became a race-winning package.
Première victoire 100% française dans un Grand Prix.
We struggle, we will stumble, sometimes we will fail, but we will never surrender. We know that eventually all the success of yesterday will happen in the future again. So to celebrate 40 years of passion, we have decided to revive this yellow teapot.
Reviving the yellow teapot, to being able to bring something like this to life again, and to even look back at our heritage, which is a massive part of what we are. We wanted to create a link between the past and the present. We find both the lines of the RS01, like the gold bar that was so characteristic of the first model, and the lines of the RS17 with the sleek nose cone. We even used the same paint. We've included the Shun Series matte colour that we use on the Formula One car today, and also matte blacks and carbon fibre, which obviously weren't included on the RS01.
The method we used was selective laser sintering. We manufacture parts for a race car in the same manner. It's actually quite exciting to be part of the revival of the yellow teapot. It's an iconic car in my youth.
We were very innovative in what we were trying to do with the turbocharged engine. First of all, we were mocked, but actually now, if you look, it's in virtually every commercial car in the world.
To passion.
Cheers.
To passion.
So it's a good example of not having to take yourself so seriously sometimes as well when we talk about disruption, but also the passion that a lot of these brands have found in what they're doing. So next up, we have an example that's fairly near and dear to my heart. And when we look at this, it's part of the advertising and automotive film production space.
The biggest challenges facing automotive advertising are car availability and subsequent model revisions. Until now, you've needed the car to make the ad, and model revisions become costly and complex. The Blackbird solves these issues. For the first time ever, you can shoot and repurpose a car ad without needing the actual car. Having mastered photoreal CGI vehicles, we pioneered the technique of reskinning using stand-in cars. Realizing that the most important aspects of the stand-in car are its physical driving performance and its wheels, we designed and built the world's first fully adjustable car rig. At the push of a button, the Blackbird can adjust its length by 4 feet and width by 10 inches. It can change wheels and alter suspension to mimic virtually any chassis design. Its electric motor is programmable to emulate the driving characteristics of almost any vehicle, past, present, or future. The Blackbird allows filmmakers to shoot a real vehicle on location, capturing all physical realities including contact with the road and ground shadows. As it drives, the Blackbird captures high-quality environmental data of its surroundings. The combination of high dynamic range imagery and laser scanning allows the team to build a virtual version of the environment around the car to create completely realistic CG car renderings. The same data can also be used for VR. A bespoke AR application allows clients to see their intended vehicles tracked over the Blackbird on location. High-quality digital assets created by the Blackbird can be reused again and again for marketing across all platforms, making it a hugely cost-effective production tool. After 2 years of design and development, the Blackbird provides our clients with a proactive solution that opens up a whole new world of creative opportunities for car advertising and design.
So that's a company out of the UK. Well, they're based out of the UK. They have offices in LA as well. But they've taken one of the most fundamental problems, if you can believe it or not, in automotive advertising is getting the cars. So what they've done is found that modular platform to be able to build, test, and create and shoot commercials and testing, but they skin the car in any possible fashion that they would like or we would like. So very fascinating. And the last is an example from one of the companies that I talked about before, Boston Dynamics. So what I'll show you is a new robot. Well, it's not that new. It's from last year. His name is Atlas. Atlas used to have an umbilical cord that was attached in a facility that allowed it to walk around and allowed it to behave in an environment. And what we see now is Atlas here, completely umbilical cord free, operating on its own, under its own power, with its own AI. So these robots are being used both commercially and in the military, so I'm sure there are many more advancements beyond this that they aren't able to show us on YouTube. But I found this just striking in terms of the progression that's been made and this robot's ability to operate all on its own. So check this out. So you can't have that video without, of course, a few of the bloopers. So if you can imagine, take that one step further and think about the applications just even from an entertainment standpoint, let alone the commercial and very practical uses in the military. I'd love to see one of those on a set of skis going down a Super GS course, and I'm sure we're not that far away from it. Okay, so next up, we've looked at a few examples of being disruptive and ways that, oh, you know what? Sorry, I have to grab my laptop because my notes are being cut off here. So we've seen some really great examples of disruption through some of the videos that I've shown, but at the same point, there are ways that, that challenging you, those in the room, and those that have the ability to affect their change in their own environments, I wanted to be able to kind of share some of the thoughts that I'd had. And so from a disruption standpoint, it doesn't need to be an all-in or nothing game. So experimenting, testing, learning, refining, and testing again is key. Have the bravery to test with intelligence. The model isn't broken, but it's evolving, and testing for that evolution is going to be a very important practice to make habitual. Put a small portion of your marketing budget aside to break the rules and do something different. At the end of the year, see what kind of return you've experienced. From a monetary and a product knowledge or just knowledge perspective, it might not all be about the financial return at the beginning. So consider your user experience as paramount. If it's the sales process as the sales process is becoming shorter and shorter due to more educated and informed customers, know that your handoff from final sale to service manager might be one of the most important relationships you can establish. And try doing that in a different way. I'd love to see the role of the service manager also evolve into something like a continued care specialist. And I know that that's an awful name, but in the world of customer service and building loyalty in your customer base, why not take a page from Apple's book of Mac geniuses? Or what about operating on your customers' ideal terms for test drives and appointments? Could you ever have your service bays operating overnight, picking up and dropping off your customers' cars when they're not using them, or even during the day when they're at work? How about oil changes and winter tire changeover services that are scheduled online, performed directly in your driveway? You're worried about what your neighbors think? Why don't you put a beautifully branded awning or pop-up fence around your mobile service area to bring overall brand awareness to the neighbors that'll be envious that they didn't have to drop off their car at the dealership? I know that in a lot of these cases we've seen some experimentation, and there are retailers that are already trying some of these out, but I don't think that anyone has really nailed it yet. Perhaps with everyone's immense experience and networks here, you can enlighten me on some of these other examples that might be out there during the Q&A, so definitely keep that in mind. And so from my experience in the advertising world, I've worked with a few big brands and their dealer bodies in different capacities, and knowing that all the material that we've talked about so far is pretty high level on the disruption scale, I think that there are micro moments that you can introduce into your business and your business practices where I've seen a lot of opportunity without a lot of investment. So although these aren't going to change everything from a disruption perspective, they may still be disruptive enough to raise a few eyebrows within your organizations, and I think we all know just how challenging that can be. So with that, I've got a few examples that I've put together, and both Tim and Brian will dive much deeper in their sections to come. So some quick and easy wins when it comes to some of the tools that I would, to utilizing some of your existing tools in this very demanding digital world. So optimizing for mobile, it's a no-brainer. So mobile devices, they aren't going away, and they certainly are becoming staggeringly more and more powerful. So using its functional abilities, its data richness, and using that to your advantage is key. So how quickly can you log onto your mobile site right now and either call your front desk or your service desk to set up an appointment, or chat with a chatbot or customer service rep directly from your phone? It's a really good test to do. And in that vein, optimizing for speed. So when we don't want to invest our time, we shut down faster than ever. Load times are of critical importance if you want to have a seat at the table with consumers. Remember that according to Wired and Fast Company, about 50% of customers now expect your site at a very minimum to be loading in about 2 seconds. And every extra second that it takes to load, you lose almost 7% of your visitors. So it doesn't need to be a groundbreaking experience. It just needs to be simple, and it needs to be easy for someone to reach you if they want, right when they want it. So from there, give them all the information you want. Next is harness the power of numbers. So hire someone who doesn't just collect the numbers. Hire somebody who can synthesize them, humanize them, and provide you with insight to act on. There are plenty of programs, services, and people that can collect data until there's a mountain of it, but having someone who can make sense of it all, provide insightful guidance based on what they see, and give ongoing tracking reports that are actually usable, those are the modern-day wizards that we all need on our team. And last, very simple win, listen and react on social media. Very often overlooked. So many big brands, big and small, almost exclusively focus on broadcasting out. And I know that our messages of new products and groundbreaking features, unbeatable interest rates, they're all important to us. But in some cases, simply engaging with, replying to, and liking some of our fans' interactions are enough to make someone's day. And they are really such easy wins. These can also even turn into opportunities if you mine them correctly. And so I picked up a really great analogy from one of my colleagues. He's a fantastic digital strategist who always reminds us that we need to be thinking about social as if we're at a cocktail party. So no one ever wants an overbearing sales pitch to just completely interrupt a genuine conversation that they're having and enjoying. There's a right time to inject your message, and for the most part, you're a guest at your audience's party. So have fun and mind your manners. So the great news is, as I'd mentioned before, Tim and Brian are coming up shortly. They're really going to dive deep into some of the areas that I touched on and look at our consumers' path to purchase journeys, their touch points, marketing strategies to get them there, and the questions to be asking yourself along the way. Also, the incredibly important measurement methods that will guide the development of your potential plans. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'll leave you with something that was bestowed upon me not long ago, and I really love it, which is be bolder now than you ever have been before. Take a few calculated risks and put yourself in your customer's shoes. Thank you.